Damien turned sharply, his eyes locking on Linda. "What are you doing here?" he barked. The music stumbled to an awkward halt. Glasses clinked in sudden silence. All eyes shifted to Linda. Linda blinked, startled. I was just... This story is just about to begin, but before then please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get notified when we post amazing stories like this. The chandelier above the grand Whitford ballroom glittered like 1,000 captive stars. Light refracted through crystal droplets and spilled across the marble floor in shards of soft gold. Music floated through the air, an elegant waltz played by a string quartet hidden behind a curtain of white roses. Every corner of the hall gleamed with wealth. Champagne glasses chimed against each other, diamonds flashed under the lights, and laughter rose and fell like the rhythm of a well-rehearsed performance. Amelia Brooks stood at the center of it all, her ivory silk gown catching the light like moonlit water. Tiny pearls sewn along the bodice shimmered with every breath she took. Around her, the city's elite moved in polished clusters, senators and CEOs, socialites and old money heirs, each carrying themselves with the ease of people who had never worried about rent or empty refrigerators. Their eyes glittered with champagne warmth and quiet judgment. Amelia had rehearsed this night in her mind for weeks. Tonight was supposed to be the radiant beginning of her new life. Tonight she was no longer the waitress who pulled double shifts at a corner cafe. Tonight she was Mrs. Damien Whitford, wife of the heir to the Whitford real estate empire. Her fingers tightened on the stem of her glass as she scanned the room, searching for one face that mattered more than all the others. She found her mother at a corner table near the wall of windows. Linda Brooks wore a navy dress carefully pressed until every seam was sharp. It wasn't designer, Amelia knew her mother had bought it secondhand, but it carried a quiet dignity that outshone the glittering gowns around her. Linda's dark hair, streaked with silver, framed a face lined by years of sacrifice. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes never leaving her daughter. They were eyes filled with love and worry, and when they met Amelia's, the noise of the ballroom softened for a heartbeat. "We made it, Mom," Amelia thought. "All those late nights, all those scraped-together rent payments, this is our reward." Her heart swelled with gratitude and a fragile kind of pride. She reached for the diamond band on her finger, still getting used to the weight of it. Damien Whitford, her brand-new husband, approached from behind with the effortless grace of someone born to be watched. At 29, he was tall and striking, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection, his smile the kind that made photographers fight for the best angle. He smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. When he slipped an arm around her waist, the surrounding conversations quieted in subtle deference. "To my radiant wife," he said, raising his glass so that light danced across the cut crystal. His voice carried easily over the room, rich and warm. "May our love shine brighter than every light in this hall." The crowd responded with a soft roar of applause. Cameras flashed. Amelia felt her heart leap. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, she believed every word. She turned to Damien, searching his eyes for the sincerity she had once trusted without question. His smile was flawless, but there was something behind it she could not name. A shadow. He tightened his hold on her waist. "Come," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "It's time we greet the real guests." They moved through the crowd together. Hands extended, compliments flowed like wine. A perfect match. Such a beautiful bride. The Whitfords have chosen well. Amelia nodded, smiled, thanked them all, but the praise slid across her skin like cold silk. Beneath the music and laughter, something in Damien's posture felt brittle. His grip on her waist was not affectionate but controlling, guiding her every step as if she were a prop in a carefully staged play. When they reached the head table, Damien suddenly stopped. His eyes locked on something across the room, his smile freezing mid-curve. Amelia followed his gaze. Linda. Her mother sat exactly where Amelia had left her, sipping sparkling water, unaware of the sudden change in atmosphere. She had moved slightly closer to the dance floor, perhaps to catch a better view of her daughter. The simple navy dress seemed to darken under the ballroom lights, marking her as an outsider among the glittering crowd. Damien's jaw tightened. What is she doing here? Amelia blinked. My mother? Damien, she's supposed to be here. She's my guest. She's an embarrassment, he said under his breath, his voice sharp enough to slice through the music. Look at her. She doesn't belong in this room. Amelia's heart stumbled. She's my mother. But Damien was already moving. He stepped forward with sudden, predatory speed, the crowd parting instinctively before him. Conversations faltered. The quartet's melody wavered. Damien, wait, Amelia reached for his arm, but he shook her off like a speck of dust. He strode across the ballroom, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor, and stopped in front of Linda's table. Conversations died completely. The hall fell into a tense hush broken only by the soft, uncertain scrape of a violin bow. Linda looked up, startled. Damien, she said warmly, rising to greet him. I was just. What are you doing here? His voice cracked like a whip. The words hung in the air, harsh and impossible to ignore. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone near the bar gave a nervous laugh that quickly died. Linda blinked, confusion shadowing her eyes. I'm here for Amelia. It's her wedding. Don't embarrass me, Damien snapped, his tone laced with ice. He reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the table. Gasps rippled through the hall. A waiter froze mid-step, a tray of champagne trembling in his hands. Look at her, Damien said loudly, his voice echoing under the chandelier. Pathetic. A woman with nothing, daring to stand among real people. Linda stumbled, her shoes slipping against the polished floor. Damien, please, she whispered, but he tightened his grip. Amelia pushed through the circle of onlookers, her heart pounding in her ears. Damien, stop. That's my mother. He turned his glare on her, eyes glittering with cruel amusement. Exactly. Your mother. A reminder of where you come from, poverty. Do you think marrying me makes you my equal? The words struck like open-handed slaps. Murmurs swept the room. She's from a poor family, someone whispered. She doesn't belong here. Heat rushed to Amelia's face. Damien, you're hurting her, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Damien shoved Linda backward. She stumbled but caught herself on the edge of a table. Get out before I have security drag you out, he ordered. A sharp, elegant voice cut through the stunned silence. That's quite enough. Margot Whitford entered the circle like a queen descending from a throne. Damien's mother moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman accustomed to obedience. She wore a gown of black silk that gleamed like oil under the lights, and diamonds dripped from her neck and ears. Her smile was thin, precise, and merciless. There's no need to hide the truth, Damien, she said, her tone honeyed with disdain. Everyone here already knows. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. Knows what? She whispered. Margot tilted her head, eyes narrowing with predatory amusement. That we saved you, my dear. That my son married you out of obligation, not love. Without us, you would still be refilling coffee cups in some forgotten diner. The crowd erupted in low murmurs. A few guests raised their phones, recording. That's not true, Amelia said, but her voice cracked under the weight of humiliation. Isn't it? Margot's smile sharpened. Did you really think this marriage was about love? This was an arrangement. Damien needed someone, pliable. Someone desperate enough to accept crumbs. Damien's smirk deepened. Mother, he said with mock chastisement, let's not be cruel. Amelia has served her purpose. Before Amelia could speak, a new figure stepped from the shadows, a striking brunette in a crimson dress that caught the light like fresh blood. She moved with the confident sway of someone who knew she was about to win. Clara Vance. Amelia had noticed her earlier only as another guest, another glossy stranger. Now Clara slid an arm around Damien's waist with proprietary ease. Damien's smile turned almost tender as he looked at the woman beside him. It's time to reveal the truth, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. Clara is the woman I love. The woman worthy of my name. A collective gasp surged through the crowd. Champagne flutes trembled in startled hands. Phones rose higher. Amelia's world tilted. The music, the lights, the murmuring crowd, all of it blurred into a single, suffocating roar. She could barely hear her own voice when she whispered, "Damien, what are you saying?" He looked at her with cold amusement. "You were a means to an end, Amelia. Nothing more." The words detonated inside her chest. Every late-night conversation, every whispered promise, every touch, all of it dissolved into smoke. Clara leaned into Damien, her crimson lips curving in triumph. "Don't look so shocked, darling," she said softly enough for only Amelia to hear. "Surely you didn't think you belonged here." The room spun. Amelia felt hundreds of eyes on her, each one a knife. Her mother, still trembling from Damien's grip, whispered fiercely, "Come with me, Amelia. We don't need them." But Amelia couldn't move. Her legs refused to obey. The chandelier above seemed to sway as if the very ceiling mocked her. Margot stepped closer, her perfume sharp and metallic. "You'll stay," she said in a voice of velvet steel. "And you'll smile. Because if you don't, we will ruin you. Publicly. Permanently." The music resumed, a grotesque parody of celebration. Guests turned back to their drinks and whispered like vultures over a fresh carcass. Damien led Clara to the dance floor, their bodies swaying in perfect, intimate rhythm. Amelia stood frozen in the center of the storm, her wedding gown heavy as chainmail, her mother's trembling hand the only warm thing in a room gone suddenly cold. In that moment, humiliated before the city's most powerful people, Amelia Brooks felt something inside her crack. It was the sound of her old life shattering, the first fracture in a foundation built on carefully crafted lies. The days after the banquet blurred into a series of carefully staged photographs and poisoned silences. The society pages called it the wedding of the year, splashing Damien and Amelia's faces across glossy covers. They did not print the moment when he dragged Linda across the ballroom. They did not describe the crimson woman at his side. They printed only smiles, champagne, and the illusion of a fairy tale. Amelia packed her bags for the honeymoon as if moving through a dream. Her mother tried to protest, "You don't have to go with him, Amelia. Not after what he..." But Amelia only shook her head. Her mind was a fog of shame and disbelief. If she stayed behind, the Whitfords would spin the story until the city believed she was unstable, hysterical, a poor girl who couldn't handle a little pressure. Going with Damien was the only way to buy time, to figure out what had just detonated inside her life. The honeymoon destination was a private island in the Caribbean, a stretch of turquoise water and white sand owned by the Whitford family for generations. When the seaplane touched down, the air smelled of salt and hibiscus. Palm trees swayed in warm breezes. The villa, a masterpiece of glass and polished teak, perched on a cliff like a jewel. It should have been paradise. Instead, it felt like a prison. Damien acted as though the banquet humiliation had never happened. He smiled for the staff, ordered bottles of vintage champagne, and posed for the photographers who arrived by yacht to capture candid moments of the happy couple. But when the cameras left, his smile hardened into something sharp. "You'll keep up appearances," he told her on the first night, his voice soft but edged with steel. "You'll smile for the press. You'll play the perfect wife. If you embarrass me again, I'll make sure your mother regrets ever stepping foot in that ballroom." Amelia stared at him, stunned. "You humiliated her. You humiliated me." He tilted his head, studying her as one might examine an interesting insect. "Humiliation is a matter of perspective. You should be grateful. You married into a dynasty. Without me, you'd still be scraping plates for tips." The words landed like blows. Amelia turned away, her hands trembling. Gratitude. He wanted her gratitude for public degradation. Days stretched into an unbearable pattern. Mornings brought photographers and carefully staged breakfasts on the terrace. Afternoons were spent sailing along turquoise waters, the staff instructed to capture Amelia's profile in flattering light. Evenings brought dinners where Damien flaunted his cruelty in subtler ways, a hand placed possessively on Clara's lower back during video calls, whispered jokes with his assistant about upgrading once certain legal matters were settled. Yes, Clara. The woman from the banquet had not been left behind. She arrived on the second day, stepping off a sleek speedboat with a crimson scarf around her hair and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Business, Damien said casually when Amelia demanded an explanation. Clara is a consultant for the Family Foundation. Don't look so dramatic, darling. You'll only give the photographers something to gossip about. Business. But Clara dined with them each night, her laughter ringing like polished silver. She sat too close to Damien, whispered in his ear, brushed imaginary crumbs from his sleeve. Each touch was a knife, deliberate and mocking. Amelia learned to keep her face a mask. She smiled when the cameras clicked, laughed when Clara made cutting remarks disguised as jokes, and clinked champagne glasses in silent toasts to her own humiliation. But inside, something cold began to form, a quiet, hard knot of anger. At night, when the villa was finally silent, she lay awake listening to the ocean batter the rocks below. Her mind replayed the banquet again and again. Damien's voice. Margot's venom. The way Clara's crimson dress caught the light like blood. It was not just betrayal, it was strategy. A performance with a purpose. Her mother called every evening. Linda's voice was a lifeline across the dark water. Come home, Amelia, she pleaded. You don't have to endure this. I can't, Amelia whispered. If I leave now, they'll destroy me. They'll destroy you. They already are. But Amelia knew the Whitfords. They thrived on reputation and power. If she fled without a plan, Damien would bury her in lawsuits and whispers until she was nothing more than a cautionary tale. One night, after another dinner laced with Clara's thinly veiled triumph, Amelia slipped from the villa and walked along the moonlit beach. The sand was cool beneath her bare feet. The ocean stretched to infinity, a dark mirror of her thoughts. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to cry, silent, shaking sobs swallowed by the sound of waves. You have nothing, Damien's voice taunted in her memory. Nothing without me. Was it true? She had no money of her own, no allies in the city's brutal social hierarchy. The Whitfords controlled the press, the legal system, the narrative. She was alone. Or was she? The memory surfaced like a flicker of light beneath deep water, her father's voice, soft and tired, speaking to her on the night before his final hospitalization. If anything ever happens to me, Amelia, remember, not everything is as it seems. Some doors stay locked until you look for the key. Her father, David Brooks, had been a brilliant but secretive man. He died when she was 19, leaving behind only debts and a handful of photographs, or so she had believed. He had been working on something in the months before his death, long nights in his study, cryptic phone calls she wasn't allowed to answer. At the time she thought it was just another failed business venture. Now, years later, the memory pulsed with new meaning. The next morning, Amelia acted. While Damien and Clara lounged by the infinity pool for a photo shoot, she slipped into the villa's office and opened the family computer. Her hands shook as she searched for her father's name in the city's corporate registry. A string of results appeared, companies she didn't recognize, patents filed under his initials, silent holdings in industries far beyond his modest career. One name kept repeating, Brooks Innovations Ltd. Status, active. Ownership, sealed by court order. A cold spark flared in her chest. Why sealed? Why still active? She took a screenshot and emailed it to herself, carefully deleting all traces. Then she found the contact information for the law firm listed on the filings. The name tugged at a distant memory, Jonathan Hale, a quiet man with kind eyes who had attended her father's funeral. A friend, perhaps. A lawyer. Amelia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The villa staff could report her. Damien could walk in at any moment. Still, she typed a brief, urgent message. Mr. Hale. This is Amelia Brooks. I believe my father left something behind. Please contact me as soon as possible. Amelia. She hit send, heart pounding. That night, Damien noticed nothing. He was too busy entertaining Clara with stories of upcoming acquisitions, each remark laced with the implicit reminder that power belonged to the Whitfords alone. But inside Amelia, something shifted. The knot of anger hardened into resolve. If her father had left even a fragment of leverage, she would find it. Damien's wealth, Margot's threats, Clara's smirks, none of it would matter once she had the truth. 2 days later, a reply arrived. Miss Brooks. Your father entrusted me with confidential documents. I could not release them without your direct request. I have been waiting for you to contact me. Please meet me at my office upon your return to the city. Jonathan Hale. Amelia read the message 3 times, her pulse quickening with each word. Her father had left something. Something worth sealing by court order. Something Damien did not know she now possessed. She deleted the email from the villa's server, forwarded a copy to a private account, and closed the computer just as Damien entered the room. He studied her for a long, suspicious moment. What are you doing? Amelia forced a smile. Planning tomorrow's yacht trip. He smirked. Good girl. When he left, she allowed herself a single, silent exhale. The first key had turned. The seaplane left the island in a cloud of spray, carrying Damien, Clara, and their carefully curated photographs back to the city. To the photographers waiting on the mainland, Amelia was a radiant bride returning from paradise. To Amelia herself, the honeymoon had been a battlefield, a silent war fought behind camera flashes and polite smiles. She stepped off the plane with a single thought pulsing in her veins: the time for silence is ending. Damien's driver whisked them through the city in a black limousine. Skyscrapers loomed like cold sentinels above the streets, their mirrored windows reflecting the life Amelia had once believed untouchable. Damien spoke into his phone, his tone brisk and businesslike, while Clara lounged across from him, scrolling through photos of herself on the island. You'll attend the Whitford Foundation Gala next week, Damien said without looking up. The press will be there. We'll announce a new partnership with the Vance family. That means you'll keep smiling. No surprises. Amelia kept her face calm. Of course. He glanced at her then, eyes narrowing slightly as if sensing a shift beneath her calm. But after a beat he returned to his phone, dismissing her with a flick of attention that stung and liberated all at once. When they reached the Whitford penthouse, a palace of glass and chrome 50 stories above the city, Amelia excused herself and retreated to the guest bedroom that had quietly become hers. It smelled of lavender and cold marble. From the window she could see the skyline glittering like a field of distant stars. Somewhere out there was Jonathan Hale, and the truth her father had hidden. She called him that night. Miss Brooks, Jonathan said when he answered, his voice warm and steady. I was beginning to wonder if you would reach out. Please, Amelia whispered, glancing toward the closed door. I need to see you. I can't talk here. I understand. My office. Tomorrow morning. Early. Bring identification. She barely slept, each hour dragging beneath the weight of anticipation. At dawn she slipped from the penthouse while Damien still slept, leaving only a brief note about an early appointment at a spa, an excuse he would neither question nor respect. Jonathan Hale's office occupied the top floor of a discreet building far from the Whitford Towers. He greeted her with a firm handshake and kind eyes that carried the weight of old loyalty. Your father trusted me, he said once the door closed behind them. He knew the Whitfords would come for what he left you. He asked me to protect it until you were ready. Jonathan slid a heavy envelope across the polished desk. Inside lay a set of documents bound with a wax seal, company charters, patent filings, international accounts. Amelia's breath caught as she scanned the pages. Her father had not been a struggling inventor as everyone believed. He had quietly built Brooks Innovations, a technology company with patents in clean energy and advanced construction materials, assets worth hundreds of millions. The shares were held in Amelia's name, locked behind legal safeguards that required her personal authorization to access. Why didn't I know? She whispered. Your father feared for your safety, Jonathan replied. He suspected the Whitfords would target you if they learned the truth. He kept everything hidden until you came of age. Damien has been trying to break the seals since before the wedding. He needed your signature to gain control. The pieces snapped together with cruel clarity. Damien's whirlwind courtship. Margot's sudden interest in a waitress with no social standing. The carefully orchestrated humiliation at the banquet. It had never been about love. It had always been about the fortune her father left behind. Jonathan leaned forward. I have preserved every document, every recording of their attempts to access the estate. If you choose, we can file charges for fraud and conspiracy. Amelia stared at the folder, her pulse thundering. Proof. Power. But also danger. If we move too quickly, Jonathan continued, they'll launch a smear campaign. The Whitfords control the press. You need a strategy that cannot be spun. A slow, deliberate thought unfurled in Amelia's mind, a plan both terrifying and exhilarating. The gala, she said. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. The Whitford Foundation Gala. It's perfect, Amelia said, her voice sharpening with resolve. They'll all be there, Damien, Margot, the press, the donors. If we reveal the truth in front of everyone, they won't have time to twist the story. Jonathan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. It will be dangerous. But it could end them. Over the next 6 days, Amelia moved like a ghost within the Whitford world. She smiled when Damien demanded her presence at charity luncheons. She endured Clara's smug comments and Margot's thinly veiled threats. All the while, she collected evidence with quiet precision. Jonathan provided a secure drive containing voice recordings of Damien's private calls to the law firm, calls in which Damien boasted of his plan to strip the little waitress of her inheritance. Amelia retrieved hotel receipts proving Clara's involvement months before the wedding. She photographed financial statements that revealed attempts to siphon funds from her father's dormant accounts. Each night, she hid the evidence inside a false bottom drawer in the guest bedroom. Each morning, she wore the mask of a dutiful wife. Damien noticed none of it. He was too busy preparing for the gala, intoxicated by the thought of public adoration and new business deals. Occasionally he tossed her a compliment, wear something elegant, Amelia. We must look the part of a power couple. The irony nearly made her laugh. Linda remained her quiet anchor. They spoke every evening, their conversations a blend of coded language and fierce love. You sound different, Linda said one night. Stronger. I have a plan, Amelia whispered. I can't tell you everything yet. But when it happens, you'll be there. Front row. Her mother exhaled a shaky breath. I'll be there, baby. Whatever you need. The night of the gala arrived with the weight of destiny. The Whitford Foundation ballroom glittered even brighter than on Amelia's wedding night. Crystal chandeliers poured light across marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Reporters crowded the entrance, their cameras ready to capture the city's elite as they swept down the red carpet. Amelia dressed alone in the guest room, her reflection a stranger in the mirror. She wore a gown of deep sapphire velvet that hugged her figure and shimmered like midnight water. Her hair fell in sleek waves around her shoulders, framing a face no longer soft with naive hope. Her eyes, once wide with fear, now burned with cold purpose. Linda arrived at the penthouse shortly before the car. She wore the same navy dress from the wedding, carefully mended where Damien's grip had left a tear. Her presence was a silent vow. You look unstoppable, Linda said softly. Amelia managed a small smile. Tonight, everything changes. The limousine ride to the gala stretched like a held breath. Damien sat beside her, smug and oblivious, his phone buzzing with last-minute messages from investors. Margot faced them from across the seat, her diamonds glittering like small, cruel stars. Clara, draped in scarlet silk, leaned lazily against Damien's shoulder, her lips curling in a private smile. You will behave tonight, Margot said, her voice smooth but edged. No more of your little outbursts. Amelia met her gaze in the darkened car. Of course, she said evenly. Tonight will be unforgettable. Margot's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. Inside the ballroom, the air shimmered with wealth and expectation. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing as the Whitfords made their entrance. Damien held Amelia's arm in a grip that looked affectionate but felt like a clamp. Margot floated ahead like a dark queen. Clara followed with the calculated grace of a woman who believed she had already won. Guests greeted them with polished smiles. The perfect couple, one donor said, shaking Damien's hand. What a vision, another murmured to Amelia, unaware of the storm gathering beneath her calm surface. Amelia spotted Jonathan near the press table. He gave a barely perceptible nod. The evidence was ready. The reporters were primed. All that remained was the moment. As the speeches began, Amelia felt the room tighten around her like a drawn bowstring. Damien stood at the podium, his voice smooth and commanding as he spoke of philanthropy, legacy, and the Whitford commitment to building a brighter future. The audience applauded on cue, dazzled by the performance. Amelia's heart pounded. The folder in her clutch felt impossibly heavy. Jonathan's final instructions echoed in her mind: wait until the cameras are live. Then speak. Do not stop until the truth is out. Damien concluded his speech with a self-satisfied smile and gestured for Amelia to join him on stage. Let's welcome my lovely wife, whose grace and beauty inspire everything we do. The applause was polite but expectant. Amelia stepped onto the stage, her sapphire gown catching the light like a dark flame. She felt every eye in the room on her, donors, reporters, photographers, the very people who had witnessed her humiliation weeks earlier. Damien offered his hand. She ignored it. Good evening, Amelia began, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. Tonight, I have a story to share. A story of love, betrayal, and the danger of underestimating the truth. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Damien's smile stiffened. Margot's eyes narrowed to slits. Clara's crimson lips parted in a silent question. Amelia met Damien's gaze, unflinching. This family believed they could silence me. They believed they could steal what my father left for me and destroy my dignity in the process. They were wrong. Gasps erupted. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing like sudden lightning. From the corner of the room, Jonathan stepped forward, a recorder in hand. The war had begun. For a heartbeat, the ballroom stood frozen in a breathless hush. Crystal chandeliers burned above, their reflections splintering across polished marble like shards of expectation. The cameras, already live for the Whitford Foundation broadcast, captured every flicker of confusion and fear. Amelia tightened her grip on the microphone. Her sapphire gown pooled at her feet like liquid night, a striking contrast to the icy clarity in her eyes. The folder in her clutch throbbed with the weight of revelation. My father, Nathaniel Brooks, she continued, her voice carrying over the restless crowd, was not the struggling dreamer the Whitfords allowed you to believe. He built Brooks Innovations, a company with patents in clean energy and sustainable construction, an empire worth hundreds of millions. He left it to me, his only child. But before I even came of age, Damien Whitford and his family began plotting to take it. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously, lenses swiveling to capture every detail. The Whitford donors and investors leaned forward, eyes narrowing, minds calculating. Damien stepped toward her, smile strained but voice dripping with false warmth. Amelia, sweetheart, I think you're. Silence, she said, sharp enough to slice through the ballroom. It was not a plea. It was a command. The room erupted in murmurs. Damien faltered, unused to resistance in public. Amelia held up the folder and handed it to Jonathan Hale, who stepped onto the stage with calm authority. Jonathan opened the file and began distributing copies to the front row, press packets detailing patents, legal trusts, and recordings of Damien's own incriminating calls. These are transcripts of private conversations, Amelia announced, her tone clear and unwavering. In them, Damien Whitford boasts about marrying me to gain access to my inheritance, about using Clara Vance to ensure my humiliation, and about attempting to override my father's legal safeguards. A collective intake of breath swept through the room like a sudden gale. Impossible! Damien barked, his voice cracking. She's unstable, she's making this up. Jonathan raised a small device, pressing play. Damien's voice filled the ballroom, cold and unmistakable. Once she signs the merger papers, the Brooks patents are ours. The little waitress will never know what hit her. Cameras flashed like lightning strikes. Reporters shouted questions. Investors began to murmur, their polished smiles vanishing into hard lines of calculation. Margot surged forward, her diamonds flashing like drawn blades. This is slander, she snapped. You cannot. You tried to blackmail me with my own father's fortune, Amelia said, cutting across her with steel in her voice. You staged my public humiliation. You sent your son to seduce and betray me. And you underestimated the daughter of Nathaniel Brooks. Margot froze mid-step, the force of Amelia's words pinning her like a butterfly under glass. Her painted lips trembled, but no sound emerged. Clara, who had lingered at the edge of the stage, attempted a soft, pitying smile. Amelia, darling, you must be exhausted. Why don't we? You drugged my champagne the night of the banquet, Amelia said flatly. I have the hotel records and the waiter's statement. Your fingerprints are on the glass. Clara's smile collapsed. She backed away as reporters swarmed, cameras capturing her paling face. Damien lunged toward Amelia, desperation twisting his features. This is nothing but a performance. You think you can ruin me with a few papers and a bitter heart? I am a Whitford. You were a Whitford, Amelia corrected. And now, thanks to these recordings and the evidence in the hands of the city's most reputable journalists, you are an indicted criminal in waiting. Jonathan stepped forward once more, handing Damien a folded document with clinical precision. Consider this your official notice of litigation, he said calmly. Fraud, coercion, attempted embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud an estate. The ballroom erupted. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust like weapons. Investors turned away, phones buzzing with frantic messages to lawyers and accountants. Damien's face twisted into a mask of rage and disbelief. You think you've won? He hissed, low enough for only Amelia to hear. This city belongs to people like me. Amelia met his eyes without flinching. Not tonight. Not anymore. Security guards, previously stationed for decorum, now moved with quiet authority. They escorted Clara from the stage as she sputtered half-formed denials. Margot, pale and trembling, clutched her pearls like a lifeline, her protests drowned beneath the roar of cameras. Damien resisted until 3 guards closed in, their grips firm but professional. The Whitford empire, built on intimidation and deceit, was crumbling in real time, broadcast live to every major network. Amelia turned back to the crowd. Tonight is not about vengeance, she said, her voice steady. It is about accountability. The Whitford Foundation will no longer operate under the shadow of corruption. Effective immediately, I am reclaiming my father's company and redirecting its profits toward projects that honor his legacy of sustainable innovation. Applause began hesitantly, then swelled into a thunderous ovation. Donors rose to their feet. Reporters shouted questions over the roar. Flashbulbs bathed the stage in a relentless white blaze. Amelia stood tall beneath the lights, unbowed and unbroken. The girl who once served wine to dismissive strangers had become the woman who exposed an empire. Hours later, long after the last reporter had been ushered out and the ballroom lay in a glittering hush, Amelia remained on the balcony overlooking the city. The night air smelled of rain and possibility. Linda joined her, slipping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. I've never been prouder, she said softly. Amelia rested her head against her mother's shoulder. I thought I'd feel triumphant, she admitted. But mostly I feel free. Jonathan approached, his expression warm but cautious. The legal battle will continue, he said. They'll fight to salvage what they can. But tonight you set the narrative. That's power. Amelia nodded, her gaze sweeping across the city that once seemed so unreachable. I don't want to destroy for the sake of destruction, she said quietly. I want to build something better. Something my father would be proud of. And you will, Jonathan said. Because unlike them, you know what real power is. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded like falling dominoes. Damien Whitford faced charges of fraud and conspiracy. His once adoring investors abandoned him, their fortunes protected by swift legal maneuvers. Clara fled the city under a cloud of scandal, her modeling contracts cancelled overnight. Margot retreated behind the gates of her crumbling estate, her name reduced to a cautionary whisper among the elite. Amelia, meanwhile, emerged as both heiress and innovator. With Jonathan's guidance, she took the helm of Brooks Innovations, transforming it into a beacon of ethical technology and environmental stewardship. Media outlets hailed her as the Sapphire Phoenix, the woman who rose from public humiliation to expose one of the city's most powerful dynasties. Yet Amelia refused to be defined by vengeance. She used her newfound wealth to fund scholarships, rebuild community shelters, and launch green construction projects across the city. Every brick laid in her father's name became a quiet rebuke to those who once sought to break her. One evening, months after the gala, Amelia returned to the modest neighborhood where she and Linda had once lived. The small cafe where she had worked still smelled of roasted coffee and warm bread. The owner greeted her with teary pride. "You showed them, Amelia," he said, handing her a steaming cup. "You showed all of us what strength looks like." Amelia smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Strength, she realized, was not the roar of triumph in a crowded ballroom. It was the quiet decision to rise, again and again, no matter how carefully the world tried to keep her down. Later, standing on the balcony of her new penthouse, a space filled not with Whitford luxury but with books, art, and the warm glow of purpose, Amelia gazed out over the glittering skyline. The city still pulsed with ambition and greed, but it no longer intimidated her. She had faced its sharpest teeth and walked away whole. The memory of Damien's voice at the gala still lingered in her mind. "You think you've won?" She answered it now with a quiet certainty that needed no audience. Winning was never the point. Living was. The night wind swept through her hair, carrying away the last echoes of betrayal. Somewhere far below, the streets thrummed with the restless heartbeat of the city she now called her own. Amelia Brooks closed her eyes and smiled. Epilogue: The Diamond Lie. The Whitford name faded into scandalous footnotes, their former allies eager to forget. But the story of the waitress who became an heiress, of the woman who turned humiliation into power, spread far beyond the city. Amelia did not chase the legend. She simply lived it. Every headline, every whispered admiration, every envious glance was nothing compared to the quiet satisfaction of keeping her father's promise and her own dignity intact. The diamond they once used to lure her had turned out to be nothing more than a lie. Amelia Brooks, however, was real. And she shone brighter than any jewel.
Subscribe to Timeless Stories now, and let's discover new worlds, meet new characters, and explore the infinite possibilities of the human imagination. Subscribe now and get ready to be transported to new worlds. Don't forget to tell us where you are watching from.